Thank you for joining us all today. Our webinar today is how to know when it's time to move a loved one to a senior living community. Our next webinars are going to be September 7th, and it's going to be what's it like to live in a senior living community? And then our next one is October 5th webinar is going to be preparing for the move to a senior living, which will include documents for Medicare, Medicaid, and much more. I'm Paige Fairbanks-Gunn, the Relationship Manager for Koelsch Senior Communities in Arizona. I've been working with seniors since 1997 and have worked with over 4,000 families in my career. Koelsch Communities operates in 8 different states. We are family owned and operated since 1958. We offer independent living, assisted living, and memory care, also along with adult daycare and respite services. Our assisted living and memory care communities all operate with a licensed nurse on site 24 hours a day. Koelsch Communities offers exceptional care throughout, and we offer so many resources, which including our speaker today. Our speaker today is a national caregiving speaker and consultant. She provides a path to relieve fear, anxiety, and overwhelm that family members experience when a loved one is diagnosed with dementia. She is the founder of Alzheimer's Family Consulting, a certified senior advisor, a certified dementia practitioner, and is also certified in dementia care. She is also the author of the highly rated It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer's Journey, which is based on Pam's 14-year dementia and Alzheimer's caregiving journey with her parents. Please welcome Pam Ostrowski.
Hey, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Paige and Koelsch Communities, for hosting this important and valuable webinar. So today, guys, we're going to mix it up a bit. We normally do a presentation and I have slides. And so we thought this time with this particular topic of how to know when it's time to move to a senior living community, that it would be better if Paige and I just took some questions that people just like you have asked us over the past year or so. And we would love it if you would put your questions about how to know when it's time in the chat, and make sure that we can open your mic. If you prefer to talk, just let me know. And we will open up that mic and get your question answered, but you can type it in the chat as well. So let's get started. So Paige and I both have our questions written out. So the first one, and this is a very popular question. I think Paige and I hear it probably at least once a week, if not once a month at that, is my loved one fell and was in rehab. Now, should they come home or should they move to senior living? Paige, that's our $1,000 question for the first question. So what's your response? What do you think?
That is many scenarios that I work with several families, including my own. That's a hard scenario to be in. As you all know, you're here on this call, you have aging parents or an aging loved one, or you're caring for your spouse. And as we age and debilitate, falls become a real thing. Falls do happen. Have you looked at assisted living in the past? Have you been, thinking about it in the near future? And then you have this scenario of my loved one has fallen. So now they have fallen. They're in the hospital, in the ER, in the hospital, and now they're in rehab. Is this maybe the perfect opportunity to transition them to assisted living? If you are on the fence about this and you have looked around and this scenario happens, I would say if it were my loved one, and I've dealt with this with my grandmother and my dad and many families, I think it's the best time to make that decision. Because what happens is, as you very well know, mom and dad or your spouse, they don't want to move. Now, this doesn't have to be a negative situation, and nobody wants to move from their home. But is it an ideal, safe situation? So when they transition to rehab, if you are thinking about moving them to an assisted living or a senior living community or even memory care, strike while the iron is hot, I say. it would be who of you to get the information, tour communities, have kind of your plan be in place, because it can be a very, very smooth transition. And oftentimes you are caring for your loved one. You might be working full time. There's so many other things that are maybe not set up in the home, safe for them to come back home. What if you bring them home and they're not set up in a safe environment and they have another fall? You definitely don't want that to happen. So assisted living could be a perfect opportunity. It can be a smooth transition. Rehabs are set up for this type of situation. It simply means you work with the rehab, they work with the place that you have chosen for your loved one, and it can be really a seamless transition into a community. Like I said, I've worked with several families, and it can be a very, very positive experience. They're able to get the stimulation and the safety and the care that they really need, along with physical therapy, occupational therapy, if they need speech therapy. All of those resources can be implemented into their plan, into the assisted living community. So again, you have to think about, should they stay home in a maybe a not so safe environment? Is it going to happen again? Or should they go to an assisted living environment where that environment is holistically all set up for them to be able to be safe and get the care that they need?
Yeah, that's an awesome response. And I hope everyone's taking notes. Or by the way, this is being recorded so that you will get an email with a link to the video on Tuesday. So just a heads up on that. So in my situation with a fall, I actually would advise, I'm a big planner, and I call a fall a trigger event. And what it's triggering is panic, for one, because nobody thought this was going to happen, or it was like your worst nightmare come true. Oh, grandma fell going down the stairs. Up until now, she's been resistant to moving, and she still is, by the way. So I don't consider it denial. I consider it resistance, right? Because the thought of moving comes with a fear of getting old, of not being independent, not being able to take care of yourself anymore, which is part of that independence. And so that's a scary situation. And so if you're a loved one wondering if it's time to move your person to assisted living, you've got to think about how to position that. And that's actually what I do on a daily basis, right? Is I'm talking with families and saying, use these words, not those words. It's got to be something that you prepare for. So I'm a big fan of planning. And so it's always good when you have somebody who's older, right? Even if they're in their early 70s and have perfect health, it's a good idea to start your research with a professional placement agent and someone who's local, who can take you around, and you can see, what's available, have candid conversations with them about the pros and cons of different communities, because everyone's different. You have some people, some assisted living communities have a pool and others don't. And so is that important to you? Is that important to your loved one? So everybody is different. There's no judgment here. And it gives you a chance to narrow down the field in the Phoenix area. And I'm sure it's true of elsewhere as well, but there's over 1,400 different options for you, right? Different housing options in senior living. So, you don't want to go to all 1,400, obviously. That's what a professional placement agent can help you with. So, to me, it's about planning, and it's about having the conversation before something bad happens. And when something happens unexpectedly, a trigger, then you're prepared, and you're also able to address the situation and at a more reasonable level emotionally, which is also important because we need to take care of you as caregivers too. So Paige, what's our next question?
Okay, our next question is, this is a good one. My wife and I stay at home and don't really socialize. They don't want to go out. What's the benefit of a more stimulating living environment?
So this is a brain question for me as far as I'm, responding, because one of the biggest things that we learned from COVID is that isolation kills. And if you had a loved one that was already in memory care and they were isolated, they had no purpose. They gave up on having family contact. And the same was true, even I believe, in assisted living. We were all isolated, and the cases of depression skyrocketed because we are social beings. So and I hear a lot about older couples who stay at home, we're watching our favorite TV program. Well, TV is bad for the brain because you're not engaging it at all. So I know people who sleep in till 10:30 or 11 o'clock. They get up, they have breakfast at noon, and then they watch TV for 4 or 5 hours, eat dinner, and go to bed. So the problem with that is that the brain is basically just sitting there doing nothing. And as we get older, we lose brain cells. So the only way to stay ahead of that game is to stay in a stimulated environment. And when we say stimulated, we don't mean like people poking you or, doing lots of jumping jacks. We're talking about, some of the beautiful things about the Koelsch communities. You go down for happy hour in a beautiful bar that rivals some of the best bars in any large city, with the cherry wood and the brass and everything. And you go down, you have a cocktail, and in the background is an amazing pianist who's playing some of the favorite tunes of your youth. And then, you go into the dining room with linens, and it's a different experience. And you can do that all by yourself or with a group of friends or just one or two, because stimulation is about auditory and visual. When we talk about stimulation of the brain, when you're talking, you're not, this will sound funny, when you're talking, you're not necessarily thinking about what you're saying. You're generating that conversation. And so that's why auditory and visual are so important. So even if you go to a restaurant and sit by yourself, you're still being stimulated. So that to me is the really important part of moving to a senior living community as early as possible, frankly, because as we get older, the more isolated we are, the more likely that we're going to lose our independence faster. And that is not a desirable thing. What do you think, Paige?
I think you hit the nail on the head, and COVID really it brought our eyes open to what can happen when people are isolated, and the level of depression that maybe was already there and really reared its ugly head. Maybe new depression has developed. For example, I mean, I have a lady that's going to be moving into our independent living, and she's very independent. And she's not a social butterfly at all, but she came for lunch. We introduced her to just a couple different ladies, found out a little bit of, about her background, what she likes. She hit it off with two ladies, and she's going to be moving in next week. And she's so excited. And she didn't really realize what she's missing. She says, I don't need any of this. And we thought, absolutely, you don't, but at least come and try and see the social setting. You don't have to go to bingo or, go to our entertainment with 100 people, but if you're having those small, intimate relationships with people, that's going to help her live her best life. And she's 92. And it's her daughter is just elated. I mean, she was in tears, and she's like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get my mom in, because my mom has literally been sitting in her home and does all her own stuff, except her daughter does her med setups and things like that. But she's literally sitting in her home and sleeps till noon and does nothing. And she says, it's just sad for me to think that my mom is doing absolutely nothing all day long. And it makes me sad for my mom. And I think mom didn't really realize, hey, there is this wonderful thing on the other side. And so I'm super excited. I'm going to be there next Tuesday with her, and she's already gone shopping for her and bought her a new couch. And so it's a really fun thing for her. So it's an exciting chapter of her life. So it's a win.
It can be an adventure. It doesn't have to be, you're putting me in a home. It's more like, we're moving to a new apartment and we need new stuff. It can be fun and exciting, and family members should continue to engage and be part of the experience versus, just, well, you can take your bed, So I'm going to ask you a side question, Paige.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about what it's like to live in senior living in our next presentation on September 7th. However, since we're talking about this, you mentioned bringing in your own sofa. Um, is it pretty typical for people to bring their furniture so that they feel comfy and can watch their own TV and that type of thing in assisted living?
Very much. That is a huge important piece because I think this generation, well, I know this generation, they're very, very attached to their stuff. We're all attached to belongings and things that are special to us. Family
Yes.
heirlooms, maybe furniture that is the best furniture ever because it was purchased years ago. They want to bring those items. So I highly recommend that you bring, furniture. You may not be able to bring it all. I don't like to call it downsizing. I like to call it right sizing. So finding out, the space that you're going to be moving to and really narrow down the very important things that you want to bring. But it is very important to bring those items from home because it makes them feel more like they're at home.
Right, right. We did have a side question from Paulette saying, what are some of the words we can use versus the words we shouldn't use when we're talking about how it's time, but then there's also an element of how do you have the conversation with your loved one. And, from my perspective, it's talking about this being an adventure. It's talking about getting the best care possible, getting the life you deserve and earned is the way I position it. It's not, hey, you are falling apart. You need help. You need medication management. When you start with that, you're just reinforcing the reason why they don't want to do it, which is they're scared enough already. They don't need your help in scaring them by telling them all the things that they need. So instead to say, you know what, we're on an adventure. I think it's time to change up the environment so that you get all the things that you deserve, excellent meals, not having to do your own housekeeping. And we'll get into that in the next webinar. I'm just trying to tease you a little bit. But do you have any specific words or coaching that you do with families to help people realize, hey, it's time to move?
I think it's case by case. It's very individualized. We really have to assess the whole family unit and what's going on in the home, what's going on with their loved ones and the family. So it's very individualized. But again, it depends on, independent living. Yes, it's an assisted living. It's an adventure. They're all an adventure. But the independent piece is such a great independence for them because they still get to be independent.
Yes.
That's the key. We're not
You don't have to go down to the dining room.
You don't have to do anything. You could be a hermit in your apartment. Now, are we going to come around and love on you and try to encourage you to come to some of the social settings? Absolutely. Are we going to try to engage you with other residents? We're going to try, but it doesn't mean you have to. So, really just making sure that how can we pinpoint the fears and how can we solve the fear? How can we figure out to make it? I think our folks really feel like they have to do all this stuff and they've got to get rid of all their stuff. And how do I plan and do everything? I think it's the overwhelmingness of the logistics of it all and trying to make new friends at such a later stage in life. How am I going to do that? But when they get around their peers that are very similar to them, they light up. They get excited. They have fun. They get relationships. I mean, we have a gentleman that moved in. He was living by himself. He moved into our independent living, lost his wife 2 years ago, moved in with us for about 4 months ago. And we just kept on him, kept inviting him for lunch, inviting him to different things that were on the calendar. He finally ended up moving in. He has a girlfriend. He goes to all the social settings where he's going to the art museum, and they're going to the Chandler Symphony, and they're doing all sorts of fun things. And he is just like, I had no idea that I still had this in me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like they expect to shut down, and that's the environment they're being moved to,
Yes.
or are choosing to move to. And that's just the opposite. Like we always joke about it being a docked luxury cruise liner.
Yeah.
So it comes down to, and Paulette, I hope this is helpful, but it gives you an opportunity to paint a much happier picture. And so, we could actually talk about, if you bring your loved one to assisted living, have lunch there, go to an activity,
Yes.
So, and we're going to get to the how to experience it in real life, and just in another question. So,
We
John
have
said,
Kathy. Kathy's got a question.
oh, yeah, and so does John. Okay, so actually, Kathy must have sent it directly to you because I can't see
Yes.
it.
Okay,
Okay.
so Kathy sent it to me, and she says, my dad was looking to moving into a senior living, but my aunt told him that my grandmother wasn't happy in a little one-bedroom apartment. Now he says he doesn't want to move. My grandmother just lived in a regular apartment and is not in a senior living. How do I move him back in the right direction?
Great question.
It's a great question. You want me to start with that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I feel like, you know, you've got you had a negative response, of course, and how do we get your dad back on course? So, told him that grandmother wasn't happy in a little one bedroom. Okay, my
How long ago
grandmother.
was this, Kathy?
Yeah, how long ago?
How long ago did grandma have a one-bedroom apartment all by herself, not in the luxury docked cruise liner?
You want to unclick mute and Kathy, can you hit unmute?
I'll ask her to unmute
Okay.
on her screen. She might not be able. She might not have a microphone on her because it's not doing it. So
Okay. Well, and I think so there was a little bit of a negative of response. And I think what you need
just 1 second, Paige. If you reread that, did she say that the grandmother lived in a regular one-bedroom apartment? She didn't necessarily live in a one-bedroom apartment in assisted living. That's my question. So Kathy, can you respond to Paige in the chat just to let her know?
Was it just a downsize of an apartment, or was it an actual senior living?
Right.
Because that's going to be a big difference in the
right.
answer.
Right.
So,
well, why don't we wait for
the
Kathy to respond? So John actually asked a question. Should a couple consider assisted living even if one spouse has Alzheimer's and the other spouse is healthy? John, that question hits very, very close to home. So my dad actually was 6 years older than my mom, and he was totally fine. And my mom was needed assisted living. She needed medication management. She couldn't take care of the house. Dad didn't want to. So they actually moved in and got 2 different care plans where they lived and where they moved to in senior living. I don't know if Koelsch does that. So Paige, that would be a question for you in a minute. But what happened was that Dad, tootled along. Mom got the care that she needed. They would go to the dining room together. They lived in the same, by the way, Kathy, 2-bedroom apartment. So they exist. They're beautiful. And they had a living room in the middle. And then we called it the den, but it was the 2nd bedroom. And they had a 2-bath, 2-bedroom apartment. And it was the perfect size. They could get away from each other. But they had a little kitchenette. And it worked out beautifully. And then when Mom's Alzheimer's progressed, and you might want to read my book, It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer's Journey, because I tell their story and then all the things that I wish I had known back then to help families like you in this situation. And so then Mom progressed. And so all they did is they moved up a floor, right? Because it needed to be secured so she wouldn't wander. And that way she could, and he moved with her. And so then he became assisted living, had the assisted living needs, and she had memory care. And, up until the late stages of Alzheimer's, when she had to move into the building next door, which was really special care, where you need two caregivers to assist with toileting and showers and stuff. And that's when they had to part living arrangements. So, it's a total possibility, but depending on where you are in the country, you really need a local professional placement agent to help you out with having those disparate needs, getting different care, but living in the same apartment. So, Paige, what do you think?
I think, well, Kathy responded back here.
Okay.
But yeah,
Let's answer John's question so we don't get confused.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll go back to Kathy.
So considering assisted living, even though one spouse has Alzheimer's and the other spouse is healthy, again, I think you really have to figure out, where is this couple unit? Okay. Have they been married 60 years? Are they inseparable? They probably most likely need to be together. So assisted living is going to be, I think, a perfect option, because even though dad's really independent, mom may have a little bit of Alzheimer's and dementia, they're still getting buffered care on both sides, if that makes sense, because they're getting the nutritional meals, they're getting the medication management. There's care staff in the assisted living that can help you, that's taking care of the one that has dementia, help you still maintain your independence. Because assisted living, people can live in assisted living and be independent. Happens all the time. And a lot of people move to an assisted living and become independent, or go into assisted living that are independent, because they want to age in place, so that if something were to happen, they have that staff member on site 24 hours a day, that if they pull that pull cord, they have somebody readily available to come to them in need.
Well, even helping out the spouse, right?
Absolutely. Helping out the spouse.
I don't want to toilet her. I have a bad back. Boom. Yep. Caregiver comes in, takes care of it, showers her.
Exactly right.
Whatever she needs. And it depends on what stage of Alzheimer's, because if it's early mild cognitive impairment or early stage Alzheimer's, she just needs a few cues, and her husband can probably do that. And so I think it's the perfect situation. The other option, though, is if you stayed at home and had a caregiver, you're not getting she's not getting the stimulation she needs. And then the next one, which we're going to talk about last, is, do you move her into memory care, or depending on the stage that she's at, do you move her into assisted living or memory care? And then he stays home. And like you said, it depends on the stage of the relationship. So
it really does. Because how many years have they been married? Are they inseparable? Are they more of a trick?
Would they like to be separated?
Right. You never know. Hey, you never know.
You don't. And that's the beauty of having these conversations, is that we like to point out how unique each situation is, and what the dependencies are, and what choices you make. It's not, as my book title says, it's not that simple. You don't just say, do we do it or we don't? It's like, well, so what are this? We ask these questions, and that helps you get clarity around the choice that's best for you. And oh, by the way, if it doesn't work out, you can change your mind. It's okay. So that's the other thing. People seem to think that, well, if I move in, I'll never move out. And it's like, you can. Nobody said that you had to stick with one decision. We don't do it normally, so why would you do it then? But typically, I don't know very many people who move out. Honestly, it is such an ideal living situation. It truly is about living your best life while having I told my mom, you finally have staff, because now people will cook for you. They'll clean your house.
Waited on.
You're waited on hand and foot. You get great food. You get entertainment. So I could go on, but I won't. So what did Kathy say? What did she clarify?
Kathy said that she was in an apartment, with maybe 6 to 8 units. So Kathy, I'm just assuming she wasn't in a senior housing community. She was just in a senior living apartment, which those are different things. So if you're just in an apartment complex that's 55 and older, you really need to look at, when you're out shopping at places, is it just an apartment and that's it for a downsizing type situation? Or is it a senior housing apartment with a community that has activities and meals and housekeeping and staff
medication
and other residents,
management, nurses on staff
that are coming and engaging with her? Because I will tell you that most of the older adults that I work with, I'm working with a gentleman right now that's 92, and what's most important to him is his square footage of his house, his large home that he's been in for years, and all of his belongings. So if we were to move him to a 1-bedroom apartment with no stimulation and nothing around him, he would not do well. So we have to look at, okay, what's his situation? We've got to kind of, you have to put your mindset in a different area to find out, okay, what's going to be most important to him? We need to kind of switch gears and re-engage him in something different, almost like a distraction, so to speak, and get him engaged with staff and other residents. So he's not so focused on, oh my gosh, I don't have my 3,000 square foot home with all my stuff. And I love to ask the question. I love to ask this question because my aunt, she's a right sizer. She's younger and is 75, and she's eliminated everything and downsized, and that's what she loves. But not everybody likes that. But I always ask this question. If you have a 3,000 square foot home, how many rooms do you spend your time in? And how much square footage do you really live in? And I will guarantee you, it's probably about 1,000 square feet.
Yep. The kitchen, the living room, and your bedroom.
Right. So when you really start to kind of ask those questions, but trying to kind of side with it, that's probably why she didn't do so well, because there wasn't any stimulation around her, and maybe there wasn't any activities. So I just wanted to make sure, hopefully I answered that correctly. But I think it's important that, yes, if you are going to move your loved one into a different type situation, if it is an independent living community and they're very independent, make sure there are activities and there's engagement and there are things going on.
Yeah. Like you said, going to the museum and going to a play. Yes. I mean, they provide the transportation, and I mean, everything's organized for you. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to buy the tickets. It's everything is done for you. The other thing, and maybe now's the time to ask this question, is can you try out senior living? Could someone try out, not so much memory care, but you can do that too, but what about assisted living? Can you try out assisted living?
Absolutely. You can try out assisted living. Jennifer had talked about, she's got a question that we talked about. Her mother is, she's not social to begin with, and she constantly refuses everything. This is a perfect
That's one of our other questions.
Yeah, this is a perfect person to have a trial stay in an assisted living. I would suggest in assisted living at least 2 weeks. Okay. Now, most places are going to recommend that you do or have a, in independent living is a little different, but assisted living, they're going to usually hold you to about 2 weeks. But 2 weeks is really going to give you a good idea of how they're going to do in that type of environment. And I will tell you, if you have a loved one that's refusing everything for you, I hate to say it, but they refuse to the ones that they're the closest to.
Yep.
So if you put them in an environment such as an assisted living or an independent living, let the staff work their magic. Let them get your loved one engaged and remove kind of you out of the situation, and let the experts work them, and they will find a way to get them to come in and not refuse things. I guarantee it happens every time. Or it's also, a lot of it's in the approach. It's, okay, mom, instead of mothering your mother, ask her, hey, I think let's go try this. Let's go do this. Instead of saying, would you like to? It's, hey, we're going to go do this. This is what we're going to do today. I think you'd really like this. We're going to go try it out. Let's just try.
There's no reason. I mean, I follow that advice all the time. It's not about, do you want? Because as soon as to Paulette's question, as soon as you say, do you want, that, first of all, that's a yes or no question, and the answer is going to be no. A friend of mine has a thing about 3 no's and then a maybe and a yes. So do you want to move? Yeah, no. Do you want this? No. Do you want to do that? No. And then it's finally, do you want to do this? And then it's maybe, and then you finally get your yes. So you have to be persistent, but it really does come down to try before you buy. But we have to work around how do you get them in the door. And that again is, you could call it shopping, right? We're just looking around, we're pulling together a plan, and so you get to try before you would move in. So why don't you try it? Just 2 weeks, and then I will keep your house, where it is, and keep all your belongings and everything. You can bring some of now, when you do respite, Paige, can you bring stuff? Like, is the apartment empty, or how's that work?
So for a trial stay, we take care of everything. Okay. And that's the standard pretty much across the board. Okay. So for example, I have another lady that's coming to our independent living, and the independent living, we're just doing like a 3-day stay. We just call it a guest stay. Yeah. And it's complimentary for a couple days. And it's basically set up like a suite, like a model apartment. So all they need to bring, it's like they're coming to a resort. Yeah, they just need to bring their suitcase and their clothes and their medications, whatever they need, to just like as if they were staying at a resort. And then our staff, we have an ambassador program with our independent living residents, and we find out a social history about them first and try to find one of our ambassadors, and someone's going to go to their door every day and get them, invite them to dinner, invite them to breakfast, invite them to different activities, and try to engage with them and really give them their experience, because our residents, who's your best customer? It's your resident. We don't live there. We know, because we hear it from our residents, but they're the ones that are living there. So they can get it right from the resident.
Yeah, I think that's so important. So be sure to click on the chat to put in your questions, and make it out to everyone so that everyone gets to see your question in case it triggers another question from someone else. All right, so next question is, my dad has been taking care of my mom for several years now. He's exhausted and I'm worried sick about him, but he doesn't want to be separated from my mom, kind of what we were talking about earlier. So is this the right time to move? How can I persuade him to do that? And I wanted that question because we're kind of talking about that right now. Like, how do you persuade spouses who I've seen so many sad situations where the husband doesn't want to move because he feels responsible for taking care of his wife, and vice versa. So, do you have an example of that type of situation, or what are your thoughts?
Different scenarios, again, learning who they are, what are some of their fears, some of their strengths in their relationship. How can we keep them together? Because if they don't want to be separated, and 9 times out of 10, someone that's been married 65 years, there's no way you're prying them apart. And we don't want to. We want them to be part of the process. But if dad is getting, overwhelmed at home and he's struggling with caring for her, it is time to make a change, whether that be get home care in the home, or assisted living would be a phenomenal option. If they're fearful and they're in denial and there's a hesitation, you can try a respite stay. You can do that with both of you in the community. But I will tell you, this has happened to me in the last 6 months, where husband and wife are together. Wife is taking care of husband with dementia, and she ended up having a heart attack and dying. And dad, now the family's left to rush and find a place. And it was very, very difficult. And we were involved with the family. One of my co-partners was very involved and helped guiding this family. And it was a sad situation. So I think if they try it out and see, oh my gosh, I can actually be with my wife and be with her and be her spouse and not her caregiver.
Right.
Like we kind of already touched on these things in these questions, because that's a really difficult scenario. And I have someone that's moving into memory care, actually, and they're living at home. The husband's caring for the wife, and he's 92.
Exhausting.
And she's, I think, 89. And what we're doing, I said, we want you to be involved. Now, moving into memory care when you don't have dementia, not a great idea. No. But we want you involved in the process. So they've purchased a sofa bed couch, and he's going to come and stay with her, 3 nights a week for the first few weeks. And we said, you can be there as long as you want. We want you to be part of this process. We're not removing you. So that really helped assure him that, okay, I can still be part of the process. We absolutely want the spouse to be there. And we just figure out a plan. And that plan has to be very customized to them.
So speaking about memory care, since that's my specialty, it's a situation where I always ask, do you have the skill set to care for a person who has early to mid stage dementia? Because odds are that if they're the same age, they're struggling with energy and prepping food and making sure that everyone has hydration is also very important, as well as nutrition. And so there's a point where I think that solution that you just talked about is perfect. But there's also the flip side of integrating into the community, especially with memory care, because they need to learn that it's safe to allow caregivers to help, so that he's not there toileting her at night. And a lot of families don't realize, there's a pull cord, you can ask for help and someone will be there immediately. So it's really important that we educate both parties, or the entire family sit down and go, okay, you guys probably have questions, just like we're doing here. And so with dementia and memory care in general, memory support, it's just important that we look at the exact situation. So Paige and I are trying to give you enough detail so that you don't walk away and say, oh, well, they said this. And it's like, well, no, it's an individual conversation. It's unique. And every family is different. And there's always going to be the sibling who says, I heard bad things. And there's going to be the sibling who's like, Dad's going to die if we don't get him help. And just to that point, and this is very important, so listen closely, dementia caregivers have a 60% higher likelihood of passing away from a stroke than a non-dementia caregiver. So 60%, or from a caregiver, for a normal caregiver, not a non-dementia caregiver. And so it's just really important to note that, and having gone through a 14-year journey myself, it's a 24/7, and you know this too, Paige, you went through it with your dad. You're constantly thinking about them. Are they eating? Are they drinking? Did they fall? If they fell, why did they fall? Are there skin tears? And why is their skin tearing? Is that a training issue? I mean, you can make up all sorts of stuff. However, when you have a community that you can trust, and they're your support team, and it's so reassuring to know that there's people there watching over my mom, and the 24/7 nursing care was a really important decision factor for me and my dad when we moved mom. And those are the things you need to think about, right? And so I'm offering to this group of people a free 30-minute consult to get some of those big questions that are unique to your situation answered. So, I just want to make sure, reach out to me. I put my email in there, Pam at it'snotthatsimple.com. So we have a couple more questions and then we're going to wrap up. Paige, do you have one?
Yes. Okay. So here's one. My mom pretty much doesn't like to be around people, but needs help. Is this an AL option for her?
So we abbreviate assisted living to
Assisted
AL,
living.
and memory
Yeah.
care, we say MC, but
Sorry.
yeah, it's okay.
The
You're in work mode.
acronyms.
Yeah, the acronyms. Yeah. So if you ever have a question about an acronym, send us an email or reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help you out with that stuff too. So I have an individual, a client whose aunt doesn't want to leave her apartment. Her apartment has stairs. She sleeps until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they bring her groceries, but they don't know if she just throws them away or if she eats them. So we've managed to get a caregiver in there a couple times a week, but she's just totally refusing help. Doesn't want to have anything to do with anybody. She's fine, except she has mid-stage dementia. We assume it's Alzheimer's because she won't go to the doctor. So we're in a predicament there because this person basically wants to die at home. And her lack of medication management, her lack of nutrition and hydration, sleeping all the time, it's going to accelerate that. She's going to get there faster than she probably realizes. And so what we're doing is we're going to have to help her understand the benefits of being in an environment, again, stimulation, not socialization always. So there's people out there, and I'm probably one of them, but this woman does not want to talk with other people. She just wants to be by herself. She's not social. It's okay. And there's a place for non-social people. Can you talk a bit about that, Paige?
Place for non-social people.
Non-social people, yes. So how do you handle a non-social person in assisted living or independent living or memory care?
It can be a challenge at times because there are your hermits and the people that have maybe never been married, maybe they've never had children, they've never been in a relationship, they just aren't a very social person, and that's where we really have to, as a community and the staff, have to take that very serious, and we've got to hold that with kitten gloves, and we really need to find out what does make them happy. Mm-hmm. What hobbies do they like to do? What engages them on a more one-on-one level? We've got a gentleman that moved into our independent living, and he is a wonderful photography as a hobby. And he's not social. And but he loves politics and he loves photography. So he had a political group that he used to just email with and be online with, and so we got him set up with some other online political groups that he can chat and communicate with. And then for his photography, we asked him, you have such beautiful photographs and you've got so many great stories. Would you be willing to do a display and, in our craft room, and, we'll have your pictures on display for a month? And I mean, he just lit up and he's like, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "Do I have to be there and explain everything?" And I said, "No." I said, "All you need to do is just give a little brief." He's great on the computer, love, that's kind of his thing. I said, "Just give a description of the photo, and we'll do a little gallery up in our craft room for 30 days. I mean, he was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a job." I'm like, he was so excited. So I think you got to find their purpose. What is the purpose?
Because they can't do it on their own. If they're in memory care, especially, they need. So I had the story of the gentleman who had behaviors, right? He wasn't entertained and engaged enough, and so he would act out. And a really smart person came up to him and said, talked to the family and said, "What did he used to do for a living?" "Oh, he was in construction. He was a contractor." And so she brought a tape measure and handed it to him and said, "I need your help." And he's like, "Well, I don't know how to use this, and I need to measure I don't have time to measure the entire space that's available across the entire community. Could you do that for me?" And he spent the entire day and every day after measuring, writing it down, measuring, writing it down, because he had a purpose. And so one of the things that I want to encourage all of you to do is don't take away this individual's purpose, and help us, both me from a consulting perspective and Paige and all the people out there who are helping you evaluate a community. They have an intake form that asks what are their hobbies, what do they like, and that type of thing. But we really need to find what was it they used to do that gave them purpose, because sometimes our jobs don't give us purpose. So you did a great job, not a surprise there, with uncovering his passion for photography and politics. So those are not things that most people can encounter. I have one last question.
This one's for you. This one's for you because we handled the respite.
Yeah, so I wrote one in.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, so put in the chat, you guys, how many of you feel guilty about having this conversation? Just write yes or no. So this question came from one of my clients, and she said, "Oh, okay, good. No, this is very helpful." Okay, so it's about feeling guilty about finding a place for your loved one, and I'm really glad that you're finding this helpful. But my particular client said, "Oh, I know that my loved one is ready, but I feel really guilty because I promised I would never put her in a home." And my response was, "But you're not putting her in a home, because a home stands for nursing home. And right. Nursing home is a medical facility with nurses 24/7 who help people who have medical needs. Those people might also have memory issues, but memory support or memory care is where you want your loved one to be if they have dementia. Most people with Alzheimer's are healthy as horses. They just, they're going to live forever, but they're not going to remember. So I'm really glad to hear that, Alan. No guilt here. I'm the one that I might need something like this. I'm smart. It's smart planning. So in this situation, it's about, one, correcting the use of the word home, because it's not a nursing home. And that's why I always say with assisted and independent, it's more, and even memory care, that it's like a docked luxury cruise liner, because there's always things to do. You have people sitting in the entertainment area, and there's people, they hire musicians to come in, and everybody's singing and clapping, and people who can dance, and they're just having a wonderful time. They're experiencing life unlike they could at home. And so we have to paint a different picture. And each of us is responsible for understanding what that picture looks like and making sure that we communicate to everybody. Because, by the way, I would say a very high percentage of people misunderstand what's available to them in independent, assisted, and memory care at this point. So we need to do a better job of educating. So, please spread the word, because that's part of the pushback you're going to get. And people do feel guilty about, well, I promised I wouldn't. And it's like, well, you're not. So you're actually taking them to a place where there's, a place that they've earned and deserved, with nursing care, medication management, but more important, fun, trained professionals who know how to engage somebody with dementia, right? Most of us, well, I do, and Paige does, but most people, the average caregiver, doesn't know how to get someone to brush their teeth in the morning. A memory care community caregiver will, right? And by the way, you were spot on when you said that they will do, people with dementia will do something for a professional, especially with the way they're dressed. Then they will absolutely do something for them before they'll do it for you as a family member, because they don't want help from family. That ruins the image of, especially if it's a parent, I don't need my child's help in going to the bathroom. It's demeaning, you lose dignity. But by going to a community, you've got dignity, respect, professional skills, entertainment, great meals, I mean, it's about trying it out and bringing your loved one with you, and looking at places, and doing a respite stay is an awesome idea. And I think Paige said it, that independent living, it's complimentary for a couple of days. So, hey, I'm going to sign up.
Yeah.
What age do I need to be?
55 and older.
Oh, sweet. Okay, you guys, I'm going to head over to the park at Copper Creek. And boy, that's the place that I was thinking of when I mentioned the wine bar with the mahogany bar and everything. I'm telling you guys, we're missing out. This is a very different world. So, Paige, any last words as we wrap up?
I think, Pam, you hit it on the head. I think just, know that you're not on this journey alone with your loved one, your spouse, or your parent. Know that the community that you do find, and also working with Pam, you utilize us. We are here to help you. Please know that when you go to a community, they're not going to ask you to draw a roadmap and for you to drive this whole situation. We're here to help you. So we take a lot off of your plate, and we can help provide a move-in plan for you and help you through these difficult times. And especially with memory care. I mean, I don't know how many families Pam has worked with that I've referred, that she's helped, that has been a tremendous help, and just understanding the journey, and just know that you're not alone. We're here to help. That's why we do this.
Yep. And we have tons of resources. So again, reach out. We're here for you. And we hope that you'll take that step. So we're going to see you guys September 7th. And we're going to be talking about what is it like in more detail living in assisted living. And so we have a bunch of questions for that. What's it like to live in memory care? What can you do? What can't you do? What should you do? What shouldn't you do? All of those things. So we look forward to seeing you all on that date, same time, and different link. So thanks again. And thank you, Paige, as always. It's such a pleasure to work with you and with Koelsch Communities. So I look forward to seeing everyone on September 7th.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
All right. Take care.
Bye.